Ambassador Kalen Voss stood in the center of the crystalline chamber, his breath misting in the sub-zero air. The walls pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence, casting long, sharp shadows that danced like phantoms. Before him, the swarm mind waited, a collective consciousness embodied by a dozen chitinous forms arranged in a perfect circle. Their carapaces gleamed like polished obsidian, and their multifaceted eyes, all turned upon him, seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The air thrummed with their shared thought, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in Kalen's bones. This was supposed to be a parley, a bridge between two fledgling empires. Instead, it had become a trial. The swarm mind had declared his actions an act of aggression, an act of war. Your kind is a chaotic variable. The hum resonated, 1,000 voices speaking as one. You disrupt the harmony. You must be excised. Kalen kept his hands open, palms forward, a gesture of peace he knew they could not understand. I am an artist, he said, his voice steady despite the chill. I create. I do not destroy. The hum intensified, a physical pressure against his eardrums. Your creation is a weapon. Your existence is a threat. The swarmind's lead drone, designated Observer 7, extended a razor-sharp limb. The tip hovered a millimeter from Kalen's throat, a promise of finality. The ambassador did not flinch. His mind raced, not in fear, but in calculation. He remembered the data files, the reports from the early expeditions. The swarm mind communicated through complex harmonic frequencies, a language of pure mathematics and emotion. They perceived reality as a symphony, and humanity was a jarring, discordant note. They had not understood his art. They had perceived it as an attack on their reality. He had painted a fleeting image of a supernova onto the cave wall, using a bioluminescent algae native to the planet. The art had not just been seen, it had been. The gravitational waves of the distant star, the light of its death, had momentarily coalesced on the frozen wall, a pocket of impossible physics. To the swarm mind, this was an act of cosmic vandalism. You will speak, the hum commanded, a wave of psychic pressure washing over him. You will confess your transgression. Kalen closed his eyes. He could not confess. To do so would be to admit his art was a weapon, and that was a truth he could never let stand. He would rather die than let them define him, or his people, as monsters. The drone's limb twitched, a millimeter closer. The air grew colder, the crystalline walls seeming to lean in. Kalen's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm in the oppressive silence. He thought of his home, of the warm, bustling cities of Earth, of the laughter of his children. He thought of the Symphony, the collective name for the human artists who had unlocked the power to manipulate reality through focused creative intent. It was a gift, a burden, and the most closely guarded secret in the human expansion. To the swarm mind, it was an abomination. They saw his potential, the raw, chaotic power he possessed, and they feared it. They were a perfect, unified whole, and he was a singular, unpredictable point of failure in their grand design. Your silence is defiance. The hum pulsed, and Kalen felt the first tendrils of psychic intrusion, a cold, probing sliver of consciousness trying to worm its way into his mind. He braced himself, not with force, but with a memory. He focused on the feeling of creating, the pure, unadulterated joy of bringing something into existence that had never been before. He let that feeling expand, a warm, bright light in the darkness of his mind, pushing back the cold intrusion. Observer 7 paused. The psychic pressure receded, replaced by a note of confusion. The ambassador was not resisting with anger or fear, but with something else, something they had no concept of. Kalen opened his eyes, and for the first time, he saw not an enemy, but a student. He saw the perfect, unbroken symmetry of their minds, and he knew exactly how to shatter it. He didn't speak. He began to hum. It was a simple, earth melody, a lullaby his mother used to sing. It was imperfect, full of emotional nuance and subtle shifts in pitch and rhythm. Everything the swarmind's perfect logic found abhorrent. He poured his longing, his defiance, his love for his species into the sound. The hum was a weapon, but not one of violence. It was an invasion. It was a single, jarring note dropped into their flawless symphony. The drones shifted, their perfect circle faltering. The shared consciousness hummed, but it was no longer a unified tone. It was a cacophony, a thousand conflicting emotions and thoughts sparked by one man's simple, imperfect song. The swarm mind recoiled, not from a threat, but from a truth it could not process, that beauty, in its most chaotic form, could be more powerful than their perfect, silent order. Kalen kept singing, his voice echoing through the crystalline cave, a defiant anthem for a species they had tried to silence.